Believe it or not, there used to be a time when people were really excited for the Vizards, that pretty exclusive group of exiled Shinigami who gained hollow powers through Aizen's experiments. This was before they had started fighting in the fake Karakura Town, and people were expecting them to make a really big splash in that battle. And it's safe to say that that never really panned out, and ever since then the Vizards were considered to be something of a disappointment throughout the series. Despite that, and despite their pretty much ever-reduced role in Bleach, the Vizards did take part in the Thousand Year Blood War arc across a couple of different factions, and that's something I want to explore in this video today. We've done a video like this in the past for the role of Waco Mundo in the Espada and the Arrancar in the Thousand Year Blood War, and the reason I'm doing this is because the final arc is a pretty big arc full of loads of different characters from loads of different races from all corners of Bleach, and everyone takes part in some form or another to fight off the Quincy threat. In this video we're going to be looking specifically at the Vizards in the canon manga, and we're not going to include Ichigo for simplicity's sake, just the exiled Gotei 13 members. Before we hit the ground running with this video though, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do so. On my channel, you are in the right place for Bleach videos every single week, and we are so close to 20,000 subs, which is a crazy number. If you can push us there, I would really appreciate the support. Don't forget to join my community as well. Follow me on Twitter, the name is coming up on the screen right now. And also, don't forget to join the Discord as well. We've got over 500, closing in on 600 members, and it's just full of people who love Bleach and can't wait for the series to return. So, where to begin then with the Vizards in the Thousand Year Blood War arc? As I said, their role in Bleach pretty much got reduced heavily after the Arrancar arc, and many of them disappeared off the face of the manga for almost the entire time, which is a real big shame actually, because the characters within the Vizards are a really interesting mix of designs and personalities. I think probably the easiest way to approach this video is to split it into two halves. We look at the Vizard captains, those three characters that rejoined the Gotei 13 and played a more active role in the war itself, and then basically everyone else. The characters who were left behind in Karakura Town and definitely had less to do overall. And then of course there's Mashiro, who did rejoin the Gotei 13 and had the least to do out of everyone somehow. So I think we begin then with the Vizard captains. In the gap between the end of the Arrancar arc and Ichigo regaining his Shinigami powers at the end of the Lost Agent arc, Shinji Hirako, Rojiro Otoribashi and Kensei Mugaruma rejoined the Gotei 13 and took up their old spots as captains of Squad 5, 3 and 9 respectively. This was a really nice development, not just for these three characters but for the continuity of the world of Bleach. It really helps showcase the passage of time and how events have helped change what's going on in the world we know, and I really loved it. I think everybody wanted to see this happen, and it was really cool to see these guys get the respect they deserved. Many people wondered maybe why Love hadn't rejoined. He was obviously the previous captain of the 7th Division, so his spot wasn't actually vacant. Komamura was taking his place. But, you know, I always thought maybe he would have some role to play, but no, he doesn't return in any way, shape or form. He remains in Karakura Town. So Shinji, Rose and Kensei are there at the start of the arc when Akon delivers his briefing to the rest of the captains that a mysterious force of Quincy's has attacked and murdered Chojuro Sasakibe. None of them are seen again until the first invasion really kind of kicks into gear, and we basically get to chime in with all of the different captains across the Soul Society. Now, none of the three Vizard captains really do too much in this opening battle. Rose is the one who gets probably the best moment in my opinion. After his vice captain Kira is, well, you think he's dead, but he's not. But he's basically dead because he doesn't show up for ages. But after he's taken out of the battle, Rose gets a moment where he meets Sternritter Yu Nanana Najakoop. And this is actually the first instance of a Sternritter being named in the manga, actually called Sternritter something. Kurge Opi was already introduced, but we didn't know he was a Sternritter until later on. Now, Rose is, in my opinion, a really underrated guy. I think he's a really cool character, and he's actually one of my favourite captains in the series, and he does get a really cool moment in this chapter. And this chapter also has a fantastic name called Bleeding Guitar Blues, one of my favourite chapter titles in the series. But pretty much the gist of this is Nanana realises that something is wrong. He realises that Rose is unfocused and that something has affected him, and he basically says, has someone died? And if they haven't, then Basby has made a big mistake over where he is. Rose challenges this way of thinking and basically says finding faults among your own teammates is not particularly artful. And then he goes on to explain how being around Izuru always gave him inspiration for his melodies and his guitar, will cry if Vizard is actually dead. And then Rose delivers one of, in my opinion, the coolest lines in this little section where he says, "My guitar and I are already crying. Don't expect to leave this place alive, Quincy." And that is really, really badass. And unfortunately, it's pretty much the peak of Rose's involvement in this whole arc. He doesn't really do anything that cool again in the future. But don't expect to see too much of this fight. Unfortunately, Kubo cuts away from it and it's never really shown again. I just want to take a moment to stop here and talk a little bit more about Rose and Kira's relationship. Unfortunately, of the three Vizard captains, this is the one that is simply not touched upon in the canon manga beyond this point. And there's not really a lot we could do about that because, like I said, Kira is taken out of the battle immediately and doesn't return until pretty much the end of the series. So Rose never really gets a chance to talk about his relationship with Kira, or we don't get a chance to see it. But it is nice that Rose makes a little mention of Kira there, and how that he would be sad if Kira was dead. After that, like I said, we flit around between the different captains all over the battle. You see Kensei is wounded at one point. Shinji has also taken damage, and he and Momo they seem to just be moving throughout the war, not actually fighting anyone at any one point, because when Yamamoto takes to the stage and, expresses his rage and his reiatsu is felt all across the Seirete, Momo comments on how angry Yamamoto feels, and Shinji says that they need to take the fight to the Quincy's before Yamamoto basically kills them all and leaves them with no one. However, you don't actually see Shinji or Momo fight anyone in this opening battle, which is a bit of a shame. And then Rose is also shown with a slight injury on his face, and then we see Nanana later on ambush Yamamoto completely unharmed, so I don't know what's going on there. But either way, those fights are left essentially unresolved. What's kind of weird to me is the Sternritter, the initial invasion is that 1 or 2 Sternritters attack each barracks, basically. So like Asnot and Master Masculine go after Squad 6, Bambietta goes after Squad 7, Kangdu goes after Squad 10, etc., etc. And Driscoll Bursey clearly goes after Squad 9 because he's fighting Hisagi Shuhei, and Kensei is absolutely nowhere to be seen. And it's kind of weird because, generally speaking, the captains and the lieutenants are fighting side by side in this section. So I know Kubo obviously wanted Yamamoto to battle Driscoll, but it's weird that Kensei is nowhere to be seen. I'm not saying he's defeated, because I don't think he is, because he shows up a little bit later on when Ichigo arrives, I think. You get to see Kensei's face. So it's kind of weird that he's just not there. Maybe there's another Sternritter attacking Squad 9, or Kensei's just not there for some reason. The 3 Vizard captains are then later on seen after the Soul Society has been devastated, but the Vanderreich have been driven out by Ichigo, and the 3 of them are gathered around Yamamoto's ruined Zanpakuto, mourning the fallen head captain. And I think this is a phenomenal scene. It's a fantastic scene of interaction between the captains. It's not something you ever see in the manga again. Like, this is the sort of thing where it's a once-in-a-story moment, and it's really special for that. The characters are... Their backs are against a wall, they've never been in a situation like this before, and everyone is kind of allowed to let loose a bit. And I love... Unfortunately, Shinji and Rose don't say a word in this fight, but Kensei gets a really nice moment where Soifon is flying off the handle about how, Yamamoto's died, and that she doesn't want to hear the bad news about Kenpachi and Byakuya at this present time. And Kensei basically says to her, you're embarrassing yourself, stop being so angry. To which Soifon turns around and says, oh, well, you're bound to not be feeling too upset. You've always held a grudge against the old man. You're probably loving the fact that he's died. Obviously completely out of line, Soifon is showing her immaturity in this scene, and Kensei looks like about ready to throw down with her when she says that. But then Komamura obviously steps in. But I really do love that moment with Kensei. It's a good bit of character development for him. Next up, we get a nice moment with Shinji where he talks to Ichigo in the direct aftermath of the battle. And it's a really nice moment because he basically tells Ichigo that, you need to push out your chest a bit more. You forced the enemy's boss away. You did a really good job. And, he kind of reassures Ichigo that Renji and Rukia are okay. Their surgeries are nearly dealt with. And then when Ichigo leaves to go and talk to Hiyori, you get a nice moment where Shinji talks to Rukia, which is really cool. And Rukia basically thinks that she thinks something is going on with Ichigo, whereas Shinji thinks it's just that Ichigo is carrying everyone's problems on his back. But obviously Ichigo is concerned inside about his Quincy heritage and the revelations about his mother and stuff like that, which only Rukia could really discern from his nature. So after this, we then get the prelude to the next invasion, and this is where Soul Society gets a bit of a chance to pick itself back up. and try and prepare itself for the next Quincy attack. Now, as Rose and Shinji didn't have their Bankai stolen, very little time is spent on them at all. In fact, I don't think you even see Rose until the next invasion. However, Shinji gets a nice moment where he phones up Hiyori and tells her that they're going to get some kind of a delivery through, and this is one of the few moments in this arc where these two actually interact, and it is nice. You do get some Arrancar arc vibes from their argument. But Shinji basically says that, there's a job for the guys back in Karakura Town and they have to get to work, and Hiyori's like raging out at him for trying to give her orders and stuff. But then a package does arrive in Karakura Town, and that's something we can get into when we talk about those guys. But that's really the only time you see Shinji. However, Kensei again gets another good moment here, and he and Hisagi have gone to the Rukongai to do a bit of training, it appears. Now, Kensei basically says that he is aware that Hisagi knows how to perform Bankai, and he says that, you need to be able to do it reliably, because if I get my Bankai stolen in the next invasion, we're going to need all the people who can perform Bankai. The more people who can do it, the better, essentially. And Kensei basically gets Mashiro involved to help proceed with Hisagi's training. Mashiro, this is her only appearance in the final arc. Very, very weird. She's apparently a member of their squad. She's the super vice captain. Completely new position, I assume only created to placate Mashiro, but she then obviously starts fighting Hisagi. She also uses her hollow mask in this, which is very interesting because the three captains never use their hollow masks during the final arc. That is a big question that Bleach fans have as to why they didn't use them. Again, as with most things, maybe this is answered in Can't For Your Own World at some point, but I always assumed they made some kind of deal with the Central 46 that if they were to come back as captains, they wouldn't use their hollow masks at all. But I find it weird that they don't use them in the battle against the Vandenreich, because the hollow Reiatsu you'd think would have been a great weakness for the Quincy. So the fact they don't get used is kind of weird. So if that is mentioned in Can't For Your Own World, do let me know in the comments below. I'm still making my way through the book. And that's only volume 1 as well, of course. But yeah, if that is mentioned, let me know. But the fact they don't use their hollow masks has always been a point of contention for fans, because it does seem like the situation called for it, and yet not a single one ever does, apart from Mashiro used it to train Hisagi. And then the other guys do use them, I think, later on, but we'll get into that when we get to those guys. This moment with Kensei and Hisagi is pretty good, however, and I do like their little conversation. Kensei basically says, you better learn how to use your Bankai reliably, because I'm not as soft as Tosen was. Now, I always find this bit to be kind of weird, because Hisagi's characterization, it doesn't really work for me, this scene. Like, I get that he respected Tosen greatly. Like, I don't discount that. I know that killing Tosen was very painful for Hisagi, but at the same time, he must have been aware of Tosen's crimes. Tosen was supposed to be Kensei's, 5th seat, I think, back in the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, and he betrays his captain. Not only does he betray him, but he literally stabs him in the back. So I have always thought that Kensei was perfectly in his right to badmouth Tosen, but Hisagi doesn't seem to think so. He basically says, you've got no right to badmouth Captain Tosen, which I just think is nonsense. I think Kensei has every right to badmouth him, but I get that Hisagi is obviously a bit conflicted, although he did get a tattoo of 69 on his face out of respect for Kensei, so, I don't know. That's always seemed a bit of a weird scene to me, but, I can see the conflict. The next time the Vizard captains are involved in the story is when the second invasion happens. We get a couple of reaction shots from them as the Vandenreich take over the Seirete. Shinji is the first of these guys to be involved in one of the battles, and he joins in with Komamura to try and fight Bambietta Bastabine, and unfortunately for all you Shinji fans out here, this is the first of many disappointments with this character in the second invasion. Shinji uses Sakanade for the only time in this arc to try and confuse Bambietta, and it does work, but then she just blows the whole place up and somehow takes him out in a single hit with one of her bombs. He just gets completely laid out and he's taken out for the entirety of the battle, and he's not seen again until pretty much the next day of fighting, so that is a shame. We do get a nice moment with Momo, though, because she absolutely rages out at the fact that Shinji's been taken down, and she tries to strike Bambietta herself, but obviously Komamura defends her. And I do think Shinji and Momo's relationship is actually handled pretty well in this arc. I know for a fact that Kubo said that he wanted to showcase their relationship, as they've obviously both been victims of Aizen's betrayal and his, and his scheming. So it was really nice to see the two of them build a bond throughout the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Obviously their bond is developed before that, but Kubo does spend a nice amount of time with these two guys. The next time we see a Vizard captain is when Masked Masculine unleashes an onslaught against Hisagi, Ikaku, and Yumichika, where basically Hisagi tries to fight Mask and he's about to basically have his head crushed like a watermelon underneath Mask's foot, but Kensei has a really cool introduction where he stops Mask's foot with his own. And now this is a very controversial bit, I think, of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, where Kubo completely wastes these two really cool characters. And this is what I mean about the Vizards just being completely sidelined throughout this entire arc. They get treated so badly. They're basically hype fodder for the main characters. But there's a decent fight in here somewhere. So Kensei, without warning, activates his Bankai Tekken Tachikaze, and we actually get to see what it does. That's an improvement over the Aranka arc. We find out that his Bankai allows him to condense the power of punching, essentially, into his fist, and as long as he's making contact with someone, they will be punched infinitely. And it's pretty cool. That's a pretty nice ability, and he uses it to completely wail on Master Masculine. However, Mask's power is pretty broken, and he uses the superstar to get the drop on Kensei and Rose. Both of them are teaming up now to try and fight this Sternritter. And Mask is able to beat up Kensei, but then Kensei kind of comes back into the fight and overpowers Mask, but with another cheer from James, Mask just takes Kensei out of the game, snaps his arm almost completely in two, and then knocks him out. Pretty disappointing. He is taken out so quickly. But now it's Rose's time to shine, and Rose uses his Shikai Kinshara, which again is another one of my favourite Shikais in the series, to presumably murder James, although it's not quite that simple. However, Rose then uses his Bankai Kinshara Butodan, the first time we've ever seen it, against Mask, and this is a really cool Bankai where he uses his illusory powers to make Mask believe that there's both water and fire afflicting him at the same time. For some reason, Rose makes an egregious error and tells Mask everything his power can do. He literally tells him, my power is music. If you hear it, you believe that my illusions are real. And anyone with half a brain will be like, oh, okay, so if I can't hear anything, your power doesn't work. So Mask literally breaks his own eardrums and then just takes Rose completely out of the fight. He uses Star Flash or Star Beam or something like that, and it just, Rose is down. And I remember reading that and being like, oh man, that was so disappointing. But it's the Vizards do nothing but job pretty much for the entire series. People were so excited to see them in the Fate Karakura Town arc, and they were so disappointing, and that just carries on pretty much through here as well. And it's such a shame because characters like Rose have such good designs, and Kensei as well, and they've got such interesting powers, and it would be really nice to see them properly to make a change. And there were so many Sternritters as well. They could have easily had a victory in here somewhere, but instead, Kensei and Rose are basically both used to fuel Renji's hype, because he obviously comes and cleans Mask up. But Rose and Kensei are down, and they are pretty much taken out of the battle for now. Rukia arrives and basically takes both of their bodies to Isane, who has set up a makeshift infirmary somewhere on the battlefield. And this is a video I actually want to make in the future about how the Thousand Year Blood War actually feels like a war compared to the Aranka arc, and I really like things like the fact that the Shinigami have had to make a really quick medical base in the middle of nowhere. I really like that sort of thing. Personally, I think it adds to the realism and the desperation of the situation, but regardless, Rose and Kensei are both placed there. They are both now in the care of Isane. The next time we see them is just after Rukia has killed Asnot, and we then travel to Isane's infirmary, where they get attacked by a mysterious Sternritter called Gwenael Lee. When Yachiru gains the upper hand on him, however, it's actually revealed he's a creation of the real Sternritter V, Gremi Thomo, who has apparently murdered Kensei and Rose. So he can use his ability of the visionary, where his imagination allows him to imagine things into reality, and he says that he has just killed them. Like, apparently they're just dead. He was sitting on their beds, and Isane can no longer feel a heartbeat, so these two Vizard captains are just dead. And unfortunately, while we do see them again, don't expect to see them alive again until the very end of the arc. And yeah, it's just such a shame. It's crazy to think that Rose's final lines in the entire series are in that Master Masculine fight. He never says anything again. At the very least, Kensei gets to say something in the penultimate chapter, but Rose never says another line, so that is very disappointing. When Gremmy conjures up a massive arena to face Kenpachi, Rose and Kensei fall off the side of it, and Isane has to go after them and rescue them. And I would assume that she does, but you don't get to see any of it. And the next time you see Rose and Kensei is not until a little bit later on, and they're in the hands of the enemy, so I would assume Isane failed to some degree. Moving on, the next character we get to see is actually Shinji, up and running again after having been healed by Momo. Now, after Kenpachi has been defeated by Gremmy, everyone is kind of converging on his location, and we get a really nice moment, again showcasing why this feels more like a war than anything in the fake Karakura Town arc, where Omaida is trying to combat numerous Soldat on his own in some alleyway somewhere, and he's rescued by Momo, who uses her Shikai to save him. And then Shinji arrives as well. And basically Shinji says to Omaida that if he's thinking of going to help Kenpachi, he absolutely has to do that, regardless of the condition he's in, because if Kenpachi dies, then the war will really, really shift in the Vandenrijk's favour. Basby then shows up out of nowhere, apparently having been eavesdropping on them, and attempts to kill them with Burner Finger 3. Now, this would have been a really cool moment to showcase Shinji's powers, to showcase his expertise and his skills as a captain, but you don't get to see any of it. You don't get to see any of it. The lava surrounds Shinji, and from the looks of things, he's in an utterly helpless situation, but then he just appears later on anyway. And it's like, okay, apparently he's fine. Sorry you don't get to see him use his powers ever in this arc, pretty much. That is another disappointment with the Vizards. However, before we even get to that scene, it's back to Rose and Kensei, and they've been revived as zombies under the command of Giselle Jewel. This whole section is where this arc does get pretty out of control. As you can see from the way I'm jumping from scenarios, characters just come and go as they please. Like, they appear almost out of nowhere sometimes. The last time we saw Kensei and Rose, they were falling off of this massive arena, and now they're zombies under Giselle's command. So she's been very busy going around reviving people and turning them into members of the zombie army. They don't do a lot. They basically arrive when Hitsugaya screams and kind of signals them to arrive and help him out, and they fight the revived Privarone Espada. But again, they don't do anything, and they get defeated. Kensei and Rose fall to the ground. The Privarone Espada have defeated them, and then Mayuri is able to turn them into his own zombies, at which point they arrive to help Byakuya fight Pepe. And again, we are really all over the place here. But Kensei and Rose do arrive to fight Pepe. Kensei lands a big kick on the guy, and he goes flying, and now they are a member of Kurotsuchi's Corpse Squad, where basically Mayuri is going around with this gang of, essentially dead Shinigami, and a Rancor, and just everything he can get. And I kind of like that. That's very Mayuri to be playing with dead people like that, essentially. But it's no less embarrassing for Kensei and Rose to be treated in such a way, and it's a big shame to see them reduced to this. But regardless, Kensei does get a nice moment where he uses Sandbag Beat to absolutely beat the crap out of Pepe and send him flying. And he also returns Senbon Zakura to Byakuya. But just don't expect to see them again, because you don't see them again. However, you do see Shinji again, and this is when all the Shinigami are basically called to their stronghold by Kisuke, because they're going to make an assault on the royal palace. And Shinji reveals that, he's kind of healed, everyone's healing up a bit, and Omaida reveals that Shinji used his powers to help them escape Basby. Don't expect to see it, you're just told it happens, which is, again, is a big shame. But yeah, so Shinji joins the others, and they all plan to basically go to the royal palace. Of all the Vizard captains, Shinji is the only one who goes up there. The other two are left behind. Shinji goes up to the royal palace with everyone else, and he kind of takes charge, which I actually really like, because he is actually a pretty senior captain. He was already something of a senior captain back in Turn Back the Pendulum arc, so it's nice to see him get some recognition here, where he helps lead the charge into Varvelt. And now we're in the final stages of this arc. But again, don't expect too much, because Shinji is only here to disappoint in this arc. Shinji leads them all into Varvel, and then they get attacked by Gerard Valkyrie. And Shinji is, pretty confident that they can take this guy on, until Byakuya just annihilates Gerard, and Shinji's like, okay, well, that was good as well. However, Gerard reveals that his Shrift is activating, and he becomes this colossal titan. And his first act of business is to just wipe Shinji out. Shinji gets one shot for a second time in this arc, when Gerard just slaps the ground where he is. Apparently Momo tanks it, however, because you do see her carrying Shinji's unconscious body later on. That's kind of weird, because Shinji and Momo were in exactly the same place, because when Gerard starts going crazy, Momo goes flying and Shinji grabs her arm, at which point Gerard crushes him. But apparently Momo's alright, but Shinji is just taken out of the fight and you don't see him again. The final couple of chapters rolls around and you do see Shinji one last time, and he and Momo are basically on their way to Rukia's, captain ceremony. And Momo wants to kind of call out to Kenpachi and the others that they're running the wrong way, at which point Shinji tells her that no, she has to focus on getting to Rukia's ceremony, that's a captain's order. And Momo says that Shinji only ever uses captain's orders for frivolous things like that. And again, it's a nice moment for their relationship, but that's it, really. The Vizard captains do return. Kensei and Rose have been revived, presumably by Hiyori, because he de-zombifies Matsumoto and Hitsugaya. Kensei doesn't do much. He and Matsumoto and Hitsugaya tease Hisagi on the fact that he never got a chance to showcase that Bankai that they were talking about earlier. But that's basically it. And then Rose says nothing, and you see him literally once during Rukia's inauguration ceremony. And then that's it. That's it for the Vizard captains. They don't do much, but they do a lot more than the rest of the Vizards, that's for sure. Mashiro, like I said, is never seen again after that moment with Hisagi training him way back at the start of the arc. Kensei and Rose, they at least get some kind of a fight with Master Masculine, and then they get involved in the whole Pepe skirmish, but it's all a bit of a mess, and it's the outcomes for these characters are disappointing regardless. And then Shinji is just the weirdest offender of all. He's involved in, a decent chunk of the arc, and he takes a leadership role moving into Varvel, but Kubo just decided, I don't want this guy around anymore, I'm going to one-shot him for the second time. So that is a big shame. But like I said, the Vizards, their involvement is kind of disappointing from start to finish. Speaking of disappointing, however, we now have to get onto the Karakura Town guys, and they just have pretty much nothing to do, and they're barely seen in this arc, and it's a big shame, because characters like Hiyori and Hachi, and people really like these characters, and they just barely show up for this finale. However, they do show up right at the start of the arc, and Hiyori and Lisa are two of the very first characters we see at the beginning of the second chapter of the Thousand Year Blood War. They've just come out of a bathhouse, and apparently Love has gone to go and buy some jump and stuff like that from the local shop. Whereas Lisa and Hiyori actually get an interesting bit of plot development here. Hiyori notes that she can smell a Shinigami, and she realizes that there is like a strange tear in the world next to her. This is really cool, and I kind of wish it had been explored a little bit more than it was. But basically, the Quincy are killing so many hollows that the worlds are converging. The boundaries between them are breaking down, and that's evidence of that. That tear in the fabric of reality is essentially that. That's why she can smell a Shinigami, because Soul Society is essentially just through that gap. And I really like that. That's really cool. And that essentially, that gap is their role in this story. The next time you see them is when Shinji gives them a call to discuss that they've got a job to do, and they're going to be sending a package their way. That package is essentially like a roller. It's like a roller and like, I assume, some kind of spiritual item that allows them to seal the worlds back together, because that's basically the job Urahara has for these guys. He wants the Vizards in the human world to patch the distortion between the worlds back up again. I like this. I think it's cool that they have a job to do. There's a reason they're not shown, and that's because they are actually doing something that contributes to saving the world. I like that. I don't mind that. I just wish they were involved a bit more later on. But again, like I said, we'll get to that. But so they patch the worlds up, and I assume they probably work with Yoruichi because she gathers a lot of that energy to help them travel to the royal palace later on. But yeah, you don't really see any of that. The next time we see them, all the Vizards have travelled into the Vandenreich to be a part of the assault on the royal realm, essentially. And I'm not entirely sure it's explained what they've got, but they're carrying a bunch of stuff with them to help fill the Urahara's laboratory with like this strange liquid that will help them power themselves up and help them power the spirit orbs that will take them to the royal palace. I think what the liquid is the same stuff that Yoruichi has been gathering. It is that energy from the distortion between the two worlds. So again, it's cool that the Vizards did actually have something to do. And Hiyori gets a couple of really nice moments here, actually. And there's also a really great panel of the lot of them just having like different sized umbrellas because it's raining. I really liked that. I thought that was really cute. But like I said, Hiyori gets some nice moments. She actually gets a chance to converse with Urahara, which I honestly didn't expect to see. She says to Kisuke that she's kind of annoyed with him that he sent Ichigo and Yoruichi on ahead when she thought they were all going to go up together because it would be safer, but she believes that Kisuke is putting their lives on the line just to buy them some time. And Kisuke says that, well, it's all for the sake of the Seirei, that's why we're doing this. And Hiyori, it's very much her character that she hates the Soul Society, she hates Shinigami for what happened to the Vizards. And Kisuke, as I said in my Kisuke video, has always been very emblematic of the laws of the Soul Society and the big picture. So he and Hiyori will always clash pretty hard on those kind of topics. So I liked that. I liked that she was like, oh, I always hated it when you said about the sake of the Seirei and stuff like that. I thought that was really cool. That line of thought carries on when they're all inside the laboratory and Hiyori uses this massive like funnel thing she's got to fill up the water beneath them. And then Urahara asks them all to change into Shinigami Shihakusho, and she does not want to do this, obviously, because it's representative of the life that she left behind, that she felt she was betrayed. But Love makes her do it. Love actually gets to do something pretty cool. He picks up Hiyori. Again, it's reminiscent of the way he used to admonish her back in the Turn Back the Pendulum days. And he says, Rose and Kensei and Shinji have all been battling the Stomators, putting their lives on the line. This is the least we can do. And it is a really good moment. It's possibly the Vizard's best moment because it is emotional and it's very reminiscent of how they used to be in the Arrancar arc and their attitudes towards the Soul Society. None of them are necessarily happy to be there helping the Soul Society, but they have this sense of duty to protect the world. And it's a good moment. And they all go and proceed to get changed. And you get to see this really kind of almost like strangely somber moment for Hiyori where she's putting on a Shihakusho, and it's hard to tell whether she's sad about this or there is some element of happiness to it. I always took it as that she wasn't particularly happy to be doing it, but there was that need. She felt a need to do it. But yeah, I think that's a good moment for the Vizards in an arc that doesn't treat them very well. We then actually follow that up with another good moment for the Vizards. When the Shinigami are struggling to gain enough power to build the doorway to the royal palace, there's a really nice moment where Lisa lends a hand to Nanao. And this is the first time these characters have ever spoken on screen. We know they had some kind of relationship in the past because of Turn Back the Pendulum, but it's really nice that Kubo actually went back and gave us something. It's a bit of closure, even if there's really nothing here. It's just Lisa putting her hand on the same sphere as Nanao's and being like, we can do this. But it's really, really nice, and Nanao obviously recognises her. She's not going to forget her, and I loved that. I thought that was a really nice little character moment. Tiny little character moments like that can really make a scene, and I think that sort of thing is so good, because this isn't the first time the Vizards have come together with the Soul Society to help against a common enemy, but it's nice to see it reflected again in the final arc. So with the doorway open, all of these Vizards now go up into the Royal Palace to confront Yhwach and his Schutzstaffel. So, like I said, we've got everyone here now. We've got Hachi, we've got Love, Lisa, Hiyori, and then Shinji as well is obviously there. Like I said, no Mashiro because she'd just been forgotten about. I can't remember if it's Can't For Your Own World. One of the books has a reason why Mashiro is not around. I can't remember if she's fighting Shaz Domino or something like that. And that's fine. I always saw that as just being like a get out for Kubo because he completely forgot about this character, which I think he did. But that's fine. You know, we can believe that she's off doing that. But yeah, so they all go up to the royal palace, and it's just so bad. It's so disappointing what happens to them. So obviously Shinji and the others fight Gerard, and Gerard takes everybody out. And then it seems to be left to the Vizards to deal with him. So we've got Hachi, Love, Lisa, and Hiyori all preparing to take this guy on. And Hiyori tries to fight him initially, and there's a nice little moment where Gerard tries to attack her, and she calls him Baldy, which is obviously her, you know, catchphrase for almost everyone. And Gerard's like, I have a full head of hair, thank you very much, which I really like, because Gerard is this like very literal Viking character, and Hiyori's like, I didn't mean that, but okay. And I thought that was really good. Hiyori then uses like a triple Cero to attack him, which again is really cool. Gerard's like, that's never going to work on me, and Hiyori kind of like, well, you know, I didn't expect it to. And Gerard gets ambushed by every Vizard, and it's like, that's really cool. And I think Lisa and Love and Hiyori are all using their masks. I don't think Hachi is. But they all use abilities. Love uses Hifuki no Kodzuchi, which is the same ability he uses against Stark. Lisa uses some brand new power that we've never seen before, and so does Hachi. Hachi's is something like Chocolate Bar Slider, Sakido, obviously. And Gerard just dispels them all. Nothing. There's a really cool panel of Gerard getting hit on all sides by these powers, and then he just smacks them all away like they're flies. Literally like they're flies. All four of the Vizards go smashing into the walls, and they are never seen again. And it's like, really? Because how hard would it have been? Like, we never get to see Love's Bankai. That was a perfect chance. How hard would it have been to bring a couple of them back in when Gerard is fighting Hitsugaya? I know the fight with Gerard was supposed to be the showcase of, like, the three most popular captains, you know, Hitsugaya, Kenpachi, and Byakuya. But we've seen these guys fight a million times before, and I know it's the end of the series, and Kubo obviously wanted to give these guys one last spotlight, but I don't think anyone would have been averse to seeing the Vizards actually get a chance to do something, because it's their last chance to shine as well. But no, they are all just knocked into the walls and pretty much never seen again. The last couple of chapters roll around, and we don't get to see Love, we don't get to see Hachi. Lisa, however, has been promoted to Squad 8 captain. That is a cool little detail, that she is another one of the Vizards who returned to the Soul Society. Again, I'm surprised that Love didn't come back, because now Squad 7 is vacant. You know, Komamura is literally a dog. You know, he's turned into a beast. But Love still didn't fancy taking that up, so that's kind of weird. But it is cool to see Lisa, you know, take up the role of the captain. You know, she's following in Kyoraku's footsteps, which I think is really, really cool. And she can actually work with Nanao in the Soul Society, so that's really, really nice to see. And then Hiyori actually makes an appearance in the very final chapter. She's on the very first page, and she apparently seems to work for Ikumi now. You know, Ichigo's old boss when he had that job in the Lost Agent arc. Hiyori's little cap seems to say Unagiya on it. So that's kind of interesting that she's taken up that role. Bit random, but I like that Kubo again gave her something to do in Karakura Town. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Vizards' involvement in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. There's not a huge amount going on here for these characters. It is cool how there are a couple of different factions of them, like the Vizard captains are very much their own unit, and then you've got the guys left back in Karakura Town, but as you've seen, the guys in Karakura Town have nothing to do, and that's a big shame. I like that Kubo gave them a kind of nominal role in the story. They're supposed to patch up the distortion between the two worlds, and one can assume they're successful, and then they travel to the Royal Palace with everyone else, but it's just such a shame. The biggest disappointment for me is how they were treated in the battles. It was really a good time for them to showcase their abilities, because most of the Vizards have really unique and cool powers, but Kubo just clearly didn't really want to. He wanted to use them to hype up other characters instead, and that's definitely a real shame. So for me, the Vizards were once again a bitter disappointment in the final arc. It's just, I like that we got to see Rose's Bankai at least, because of all the Vizards, that is the one I wanted to see the most. but like no Shinji Bankai, no Love Bankai, no Hachi or Mashiro Zanpakuto, you know, that sort of thing is just so weird to me. At least we got Shinji's in Can't Fear Your Own World, but yeah, that was a real shame how he treated the Vizards, but I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the Vizards in the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Which of the Vizards was your favourite in the final arc, and which one was the most disappointing? Do let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell to get all these videos in your subscription box. As soon as they come out, I'd really appreciate the support. But until next time, guys, I shall catch you later. I'll see you then.